Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies and comrades, I hope you're doing well wherever you are. I want to give a huge reason why RUTO will not succeed in his governance. As far as, let me be specific. He will not succeed to get us out of this financial turmoil that Kenya is in, okay? Kenya, we are no different from other countries. Uganda, Ghana. You see Ghana, they are in dire economic situation right now. But let's stick to Kenya, okay? I want to quote a few paragraphs from this book, The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, okay? He has several editions of this book. And it is very an eye-opener because this guy is who you call an economic hitman. He used to work for World Bank and IMF, okay? So he's the one who went to these states, these countries, and he will negotiate the loans that the IMF and World Bank will offer the countries to put them in debt. So I will read a few paragraphs and then tie it in and explain to you why, since Kenya, we owe the IMF and World Bank, we borrow from them. And actually, we are actually borrowing some more. I just read today in the news that the RUTO government is about to borrow 780 something billion. I don't know. And RUTO told us that he will not borrow. That's why he was raising taxes. But that's a story for another day. I just want to give you a reason why you should not put your hopes up in regards to RUTO getting out of this financial trouble, okay? Or getting out of these loans, because he will not. And I will read a few points and then explain why, all right? So here it is. Just give me a second. I'm gonna read. I'm a slow reader, so bear with me. All right, let's go. In page 13, it says, money that had been budgeted for healthcare, education, and other social services was diverted to pay interest on the loans. In the end, the principals were never paid down. The country was shackled by debt. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, hitmen arrived and demanded that the government offer its oil or other resources to our corporations to cut rate prices, and that the country privatize its electric, water, sewer, and other public sector institutions and sell them to the corporatocracy. Big business was the big winner. In every case, a key condition of such loans was that the projects will be built by our engineering and construction companies. Most of the money never left the United States. It simply was transferred from banking offices in Washington to engineer offices in New York, Houston, or San Francisco. We, economic hitmen, also made sure that the recipient country agreed to buy airplanes, medicines, tractors, computer technology, and other goods and services from our corporations, despite the fact that the money was returned almost immediately to the corporate members of the corporatocracy. The recipient country, the debtor, was required to pay it all back, principal plus interest. If an EHM, which is economic hitman, was completely successful, the loans, I'm about to get done, the loans were so large that the debtor was forced to default on its payments after a few years. When this happened, we, the economic hitmen, like the mafia, demanded our pound of flesh. This often included one or more of the following: control over United Nations votes, the installation of military bases, or access to previous resources such as oil. Of course, the debtor still owed us the money, and another country was added to a global empire. Okay? Now, if you remember, and he just mentioned about UN vote. Remember a few months ago when there was a resolution to sanction Russia. How did the RUTO government vote? They voted against Russia. Of course, who influenced them? The United States. And this goes back to the video that I made yesterday when Mr. Ndoro mentioned how they get their money. We get their loans from the Federal Reserve in the United States. And I explained to you that the Federal Reserve in the United States is not a US bank. This is a independent, actually it's foreign. And the real owners of that Reserve Bank, Federal Reserve Bank, are unknown, okay? It is an independent entity. Even the US government cannot audit the Federal Reserve, okay? And I mentioned also that the CBK, Central Bank of Kenya, which will soon be governed by Mr. Kamau Thuge, is also independent in such way. Yes, it says it's a government bank, but it's not. It's not a national bank. Even there's a law, I think it's section 491 of, I forgot the law, I'll tell you guys later. It says that the CBK is an independent from the government. It's independent. You cannot audit it, how they conduct their business, okay? That's why there was a guy who wrote a piece on it, how he explained the incestuous relationship between the Kenyattas and their private banks with the CBK. And you wonder why these guys are trillionaires in Kenya shillings, okay? So that's an example of how they do this international interests, corporations, okay? Which this guy referred to corporatocracy, okay? It's a nexus of private banks, corporations, IMF and World Bank working together to put this country, especially third world countries, in debt. And now we see with RUTO how it is, okay? And I'll give you, let me show you a snippet so you understand where I'm going. I'll give you a quote by Ndoro so you know how this works. You heard what I read, and let me give you a quote so you see where I'm going with this, okay? Just hold on.
And that's changing, of course. Every country on earth tends to have an account with the Federal Reserve, especially New York. I know the Federal Reserve is seven basically regional reserves that form the Federal Reserve. And so, as a general rule...
Why does every country in the world have an account with them?
That's a conversation, a whole conversation for another day. Suffice it to say, when they then raise... part of the reason is also a confidence issue, and that's a structure of international finance.
Okay.
So when you launch your Eurobond, and the investors say, yes, we're going to buy a bond, then they ask, where do we deposit the money? Now, they could deposit the money into Kenya's bank account with Chase Manhattan. But, it's a sovereign country.
So as you can see, the gentleman was trying to avoid that question of Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, there was a Federal Reserve Act in 1913 was enacted where Federal Reserve was given the money, not the money, but the authority, okay, by the US government to conduct their business, okay? And Woodrow Wilson, after that, he wrote something when he was living in his office, and he basically said, I will find that reading his opinion on that. And he basically cried, lamented the fact that they enacted this Federal Reserve Act because it gave their money powers to a foreign entity, okay? And even before that, the reason why Abraham Lincoln was probably killed is because he wanted to reintroduce the idea of the greenbacks that was, and they wanted to nationalize the US banks, and have their own money, not through the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a foreign entity. It is rumored that the British Crown is still, owns that, or people like the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller, okay, which basically they control the money and the economy, the money flow in the US. It's a private entity. But now, given what I just read you from this book, and you see why these IMF and World Bank, they tend to come to a country, and you wonder why a lot of services are being privatized. I just saw today that there were some people who are protesting because they want to privatize the water supply in Nairobi. You wonder why there's so much privatization of much of these services that we need as Kenyans, okay? We know Kenya Power is privatized, and you wonder why the prices are so high. These are the things that we're talking about. When you take these loans and you can't pay it back, this is what happens. Now, I want to play a clip by this Professor Nkube. He's from Uganda. He explains how this IMF, and he refers to them as International Mercenary Fund, not International Monetary Fund, how they kind of take over, through their corporations, take over the country's economy and control you. That's why I'm saying RUTO has been giving wonderful speeches about Pan-Africanism and how Africa should stand up to these Europeans and so forth and so forth. But in practice, we are still enslaved. I'll let this professor explain and pay attention to what he's saying, because what he's saying is very vital. But anyway, but before I play you this clip by Professor Nkube from Uganda explaining this, I want to read something from David Ndii, because I think this is very telling. And I think these are the signs that he's kind of starting to throw the towel, RUTO will soon show his face. And I don't blame him. He has no control. I mean, I can't really blame him, but I want to read something that David Ndii wrote today, 6 hours ago from the time I'm reading right now. He says, Kibaki found waste and corruption, participated in and protected corruption, Angolism among others, delivered on his economic agenda and handed over a government as wasteful and as corrupt as he found it. Okay? He was referring to somebody who goes by the name, because he was responding to somebody who goes by the name Engineer Eric Johnson, who said, advise and support the president on delivering on our economic transformation. This statement alone should stop you from tweeting the next nonsense you just did. How can you achieve what you're saying with all the wastages? Sometimes I wonder what you actually advise Nabi on, referring to RUTO, okay? And even before that, David Ndii also replied to somebody else and say this: combating corruption is the work of independent oversight agencies like Controller of Budget. Executive cannot police itself. I am in a position to abuse office. I have a budget, I can steal. How can I be left to watch over myself? He makes a good point, but at the same time, you can't just say that, oh, you know what, I can't just watch myself, I'm part of government, I'm the executive, I can't, Now, what you can do as an executive, if you want to really be fair and show people that you're being fair, you should strengthen the institutions that are tasked with this job of, making sure there's no corruption. We saw the former DPP Haji, who headed, was sitting there, he didn't even indict anybody. Every case that he ever came to his desk was like, oh, not enough evidence. Now he's what, the head of NIS, the spy guy. So this is an indication, that shows you. It's kind of what I get from David Ndii basically is saying, there's going to be corruption, there's going to be wastages. So what? I have no power over it. That's basically what he's saying. But these are the things that I'm talking about. This government now it's over. The honeymoon phase of this government is over, okay? So for people who have hopes, who think RUTO is going to transform this country, I don't think so. I'm not saying it's impossible. He can, but he will be at loggerheads with the West, with the people who we owe debt to, which can mean, if he does that, he can face actually assassination, or they can try to take him out by using the opposition. So while this is going on, the opposition is totally rudderless, clueless, have absolutely no plan to counter what RUTO is doing. They're just done, okay? But anyway, I want to play this clip by Professor Nkube from Uganda, and he explains how IMF and World Bank kind of exploit these nations, poor nations, and actually keep them poor. And he gives example of Ethiopia and so forth. And just take a look, and it will give you an insight of how these things work, all right? Take a look, and I'll talk to you guys later. Again, before I let you play that, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Peace.
The Central Police Station, every day, 30 kilos, 70 kilos, 80 kilos, each kilo, 100 million. It comes from Mubende, it comes from Buhweju, it comes from, and all of them, you know what happened? The World Bank, the so-called World Bank, and the International Mercenary Fund, they funded a study.
Was that supposed to mean monetary?
Well, you can call it monetary. I call it mercenary fund. You need to learn how to call these organizations by their real names. It is a mercenary fund. But they funded a study where they identified for the country where all these minerals were. And as soon as they finished, the same officials of the World Bank, like Jennifer Hinton, a Canadian, then moved from the World Bank, went and got concessions. They passed the law in Parliament, got concessions. Now they have concessions even to mine uranium.
But you see, Professor Kirankuba, what is interesting about this is, unless you have passed the law here, they wouldn't come and impose.
No,
they are not imposing you on
fund.
You have passed the law yourselves.
Who? Our parliamentarians, who can't even read a book. Most of them can't read even a law. You can't reduce
them to that, RUTO.
Okay, you mention one who has read a book, call him on radio and say, what is the last book you read in the last 1 month? How many even know how much gold is produced in this country? How many? They don't. You go to the geology department, every month the only gold that they pay tax for is 5 kilos, which is only 5 kilos a month.
So where do you get the rest of the data?
Where do we get the rest of the data? From the sellers, the people who sell.
That is gossip.
Gossip? You want me to take you tomorrow?
That is pure gossip. I mean, unless it is documented, recorded somewhere.
Documented by who? I document. I do a scientific analysis. I go to where they mine gold. I buy it. I see where they sell it. I sit there and I see how many people are selling.
Let's get back to the renaissance of Africa and development. What are the two things you would do for Africa to be able, let me even reduce it to Uganda specifically.
Yes. Number one,
Uganda, what would you do to spur it to levels of growth and development that are
number
desired?
one, I would make my own money and I would not balance it or I would not back it by the American dollar or any other currency. In fact,
it wouldn't be money.
What is money?
Weighed against what? Because money...
American money is made against what?
Gold.
Which gold? My God, you said so you have internet. Check, they don't have any. It is just paper. It's made up by tanks and F-15 fighters. They have no gold. It is the Federal Reserve has no reserve and is not federal. It's a private institution. Hey, you disappoint me today.
No,
Yes,
you actually disappoint me. I know.
The Federal Reserve.
This is where we differ as students of economics.
Wait. Okay, now let's talk economics.
The student of history and the student of economics will differ completely.
I am not only a student of economics, I am a teacher of economics. And I'm going to teach economics on your show. And I'm a teacher. I can't afford to be ridiculous. I am coming on your show to tell you that the Federal Reserve, first of all, is not federal. It's not a government agency. It is a private institution owned by 12 individuals. And it has no reserve. The dollar has no reserve. It is just paper with graphics on it. And how dare our country, backs its money
against the dollar,
against a piece of paper which somebody prints. When the Secretary to the Treasury in America wants money, wants to buy, for example, Uganda Airlines, let's assume, he is not going to say what? He orders the mint. He asks them, how long will it take you to print this? Yes, I know truth makes you laugh. Why do you think they're having trouble with Russia? Because Russia is buying gold and it is moving away from the dollar. And China is the same. China is moving gold. Look at the countries that have now the largest collection of gold. You'll find Russia amongst them. Russia and China. They want a currency that is backed by gold. And Uganda has gold. What they would do is they would make our currency gold, which means 1 gram of 1 shilling, if it was gold, would be now equivalent to about 120 of today's money, Uganda shillings, which would be about $50. Our shilling would be about $50.
If it were gold.
If it were gold. And we have gold. So instead of letting this gold hemorrhage out of the country, we would get this money and turn it into gold.
The gold standard.
That's the gold standard. You've got it. Do you know how it started? People would come, they deposit gold here. Because gold is heavy, it's very heavy, you would give them a piece of paper. Now, when they get to Masaka, instead of coming back when they want to purchase something, they would pass the paper to someone else. That is why when you look at the pound, they say promise to pay on demand, a demand note. So now, most of the money is fake money because it is not backed by gold.
You stayed in the past. That passed on.
No, it is today. This is not the past. This is today. The world reserve currency, even this Dominic Strauss-Kahn that you hear now in France that they are saying that he was whatever, he also wanted to move the world away from the dollar. And the moment he mentioned that he wanted the International Monetary Fund to set up its own currency other than the dollar. And that is the real battle between America and Russia. Because Russia has seen that the rest of the world produces real goods and America only prints dollars. And if you want to destroy that country, the best thing you could do is move away from the gold, from the dollar.
Let's get to the second one. You say that you would put the currency against a gold standard.
Yes,
that is the first one.
That's the first one.
The second?
The second one, I would not allow any foreign banks to operate in this country. No foreign banks. Now, let me tell you.
That only happens in North Korea.
I've told you Ethiopia. Ethiopia doesn't have foreign banks. It doesn't happen in North Korea, no. Let me first explain to you why. Federal fractional reserve lending. Fractional reserve lending is you have, if you have 4 banks, for example, Bank A, Bank B, Bank C, Bank D. If I take $10 million, by law, the bank is allowed to keep 10% of what I've deposited and lend out the rest of the percentage, 90%. So if the bank started with nothing and I came and deposited 10 million, it would reserve 1 million, it would lend out 9 million, but at interest. Yeah. Now it will take actual collateral. It started with nothing. It has 1 million reserve. It has a portfolio of about 12 million, and it has somebody's house, which it has taken at a fraction of what they call forced sale value. But the person who gets this money now goes and deposits it in another bank, like 9 million. The bank now takes 10%, which is 900,000, and lends out 8.1. And that person goes and deposits it in another bank. So one deposit creates money about 90 times. Fractional reserve lending allows the bank to create money out of thin air. And whereas it creates money out of thin air, it actually lends you money, lends you that thin air and takes actual collateral. Once you understand that, then you understand economics. You need not know anything else. If you don't understand this, anything else about economics will confuse you. And bring to Mzime Mtebire on this show and ask him about fractional reserve banking and phantom deposit. When you go to the bank and deposit money, or you ask for a loan, the bank doesn't go out to sell matoke and get the money and give it to you. No. After making you run around, they say, Mr. Chivazo, we now have the money. You can go and
check.
It's
on your account.
So what they have done is a computer transfer, what we call a phantom deposit. But you know what Chivazo gave them? He gave them the title for his house in Lunguja.
Viewers, I take a break and I return with Professor Kirankuba.